Welcome to another edition of the Learning Journey podcast. I am your host, Wayne Heinsohn, and today we head off to Arnhem Land to chat with a brand new member of the MAF family. He's the Deputy Program and Operations Manager. Ben Brown is his name. Hey, Ben, welcome to the Learning Journey.
Thanks very much, Wayne. It's great to be with you.
It is fantastic to have you on the podcast. I've got to start with this. I hear an accent there. I'm going to suggest that's a British accent. Would I be correct?
You are correct. Yes. Yeah. It's quite funny, and the people I meet all try and guess what part of the UK I'm from. And for me, it's really obvious. I'm from the south of England, and I think it's quite obvious. But no, in Australia, they can't match the accent. So I'm constantly telling people that I'm from the south of England. It's good fun. It's a nice way to get to know people and a conversation starter.
Yeah, very good. So what I want to do is I want to talk about your journey. How does an Englishman from the south of the country head to the northern part of Australia and Arnhem Land? Like, it's been a long journey for you to get there, and you've only been on the ground for a month. So what's kind of like the first few things that you've really learnt about being in the northern part of Australia there in Arnhem Land?
I suppose it's the privilege of being here, speaking to the passengers who fly with us regularly, and getting a real understanding and a real flavour of what Arnhem Land's about. Not many people from Australia have the privilege of coming up here and visiting the Northern Territories, visiting Arnhem Land, and then specifically visiting the homeland communities where the Yolngu, so the people that MAF is here to serve, live. And so I think the biggest thing that's really struck me is just what a privilege it is to be able to serve here and then go and serve the Yolngu and visit the homeland communities and see the impact that MAF has. And so on a personal level, on a work level, that's kind of the biggest thing that struck me in the last month.
Yeah. Well, we're going to come back to Arnhem Land in a little while on the podcast, but for now I want to go back because what has really sort of struck me as I have more people on the Learning Journey podcast is that often their journey to MAF has started many, many years ago. And as it is for you, I believe it was you were just a boy and you sort of heard about MAF and you thought, hey, I want to be involved in aviation and I want to be involved in MAF. So, what were the things that really just sort of struck a chord with you as a boy where you thought, this is what I want to do? When I get older and I've got the skills and I'm equipped and all those kind of things, this is where I want to head.
You're absolutely right. When I was a boy, I think I was about 13. And there was a MAF poster in our church. And I think, and for those of you who've been through the recruitment process or know MAF, there's a poster of an aeroplane running down a really steep hill, taking off. And it just looks so incredible to see an aeroplane doing something that really you don't think an aeroplane can do because you're just so used to flat runways. But this dirt runway that's running down a really steep hill. And I remember looking at that poster when I was younger and going, wow, that just looks amazing. And it was in my church, and it was quite clear that MAF was a Christian organization. And I just looked and I thought, you know what, one day I really want to go and do that, go and work for that organization. Because for me, God had obviously instilled a desire, a passion to go and work in aviation. And it's something which from a very, very young age, I knew I wanted to go and do. So I knew I wanted to be a pilot. And all the way through secondary school, high school, I knew I wanted to be a pilot. And so this exposure, like at the age of 13, cemented something on my heart that God wanted me to go and work in aviation. But there was just this organization called MAF that I think he was going to lead me to.
Can I ask you, Ben, at 13, we're pretty naive. We think, oh, it's pretty straightforward. I'll finish school, I'll get my pilot's license, off I'll go. Like, are you surprised that the journey has taken as long as it has for you to actually get to program with MAF? Because, you've spent like 15 odd years in the military in between. And obviously, that's been a time of equipping and gaining skills and those sorts of things. But like, does your 13-year-old self and now your adult self, are they sort of seeing things differently?
That direction of going towards working for the military was also there. And so I kind of, when I was 14 in the UK, we go and do a week's work experience. And so you get to go out of school for a week and you go and try out work in different places. And I was really fortunate. I got to go and work with the RAF and the Army for a week and just be around helicopters for a week. And it was at that point that I knew it's like, right, I want to be a military pilot. Certainly, I think it's kind of, as we talk about journeys and God's plan, I think it's definitely God's plan to send me down that route first, to go to the military. But at the same time, there's always just in the background this MAF. It's like, you're going to go and do the military stuff, but you know what, the direction and the way I'm leading you is to build up that experience and understanding of aviation so that you can go and serve me with MAF further down the line. And right from the moment I joined the military and started my pilot training, I knew that it would lead me to MAF eventually. I didn't know when, and I didn't quite know it would go in that direction. And that's the journey that God would take me on. But I always knew it would end up here after a spell in the military.
So what are some of the things that you learnt in the military that you're still using now? So there's obviously skills, in terms of flying. So that's probably a given. But maybe what are some of the other skills, maybe even, life skills that you learnt in the military that really you're going, I'm still using those today, serving with MAF in Arnhem Land?
Certainly joining the military is a really formative experience. I joined as an officer back in 2008. So part of that process of joining as an officer is you have to spend a year at officer trainings, and you spend a year just learning about leadership and management skills. There's an element of classroom based, but a lot of it is practical exercises. So a lot of it is about pushing the boundaries of what you think you're capable of and then pushing them a bit further and constantly evolving that process throughout a year in various ways, so that the army is essentially producing leaders who can leave Sandhurst and then go and serve on the front line of a battlefield. So in my case, I spent a year at Sandhurst and kind of went through that transformative experience of developing my leadership management skills, building up that confidence in who I am. And then straight away, I got sent to Afghanistan for 4 months. And kind of the result of that year at Sandhurst was so evident in the sense of how I developed as an individual, and then able to go to somewhere like Afghanistan and be totally adaptable, ready to support the people I'm there to lead, ready to support the overall mission that we were there to achieve. And so right from the very beginning, in that very first year, there's a lot of demand and there's a lot of training and there's a lot of building people up in order to kind of go and serve in some really hostile places, and Afghanistan obviously being the case in point there. And that journey just of learning and developing the military is just continuous. And it's a very well-trod path for people. So yes, I was learning how to fly aircraft and developing my skills in that space and everything to do with aviation. But I was also developing as an individual, as a leader, as a manager, and being given formal training, but then also that on-the-job stuff. So only the stuff that you can learn in a practical sense during quite demanding times. And so what the military has given me is a real resilience is the first thing, definitely. So the ability to go into situations which aren't familiar, which are potentially hostile. And then also it's given me all that great aviation experience. So there's two things there which have kind of really been able to come together so that when it comes to joining an organization outside, and in this case, MAF, I'm able to bring that leadership and management experience inside all the different training and operations I've been on, and then also bring all that aviation experience of spending 14 years flying helicopters and aircraft, and then hopefully bring them together inside MAF and be able to use them just to support the organization here. I like to think I can bring a little something to the party that had I joined MAF straight away and not been in the military, I may not have been able to do. And to me, that's just so important to just bring that little bit extra. I really believe God had a plan for. And that's kind of why we've ended up now quite a few years since I was 13 and built me up to this point now to actually being here on the ground in Arnhem.
Now, one thing you touched on, which I really want to unpack a little if we can, and that was the concept of continuous learning, because as an organization, MAF, we want to have a culture of learning. So, that's another way to say, let's continue to learn. So can you sort of speak into, the importance of that continual learning, just from your experience, be that with the military or even, as you transitioned into MAF?
If we're not learning, then we're very much standing still. If we're standing still and not doing ourselves, then I don't think that we're able to potentially have the impact God wants us to have in the areas of our lives that he takes us. Certainly, I think that God has a plan for all of us wherever he sends us, and he wants us to continue that journey of learning and building, and both in a spiritual sense, but also in a very practical sense in terms of the skills and knowledge and experience that we have in our own spheres. So it's learning and development in a very formal sense. So developing skills and experience and then qualifications that fall out of that. But also, I think more importantly, it's just that personal development. Some people might call it maturity and maturing in yourself. But equally, I don't necessarily think it's that. I think it's very much just the ability to take on new skills and be able to reflect on what you've done in the past. And so eventually get to a point where you're able to truly understand your weaknesses, truly understand your strengths, and then understand when you go into any situation, okay, what can I bring to this? Where do my strengths lie? How can I use those to support people? And where my weaknesses are, how can I look to my team and those around me to support me in those areas? And I think that for me going forward, it's all about just building on your strengths, recognizing your weaknesses, building on them where you can. And for me, that's the biggest thing I've learned out of the military is understanding what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, and then how I use both myself and those around me to support both of those elements. And for me, that's what the journey has been all about.
None of us are probably comfortable acknowledging that we have weaknesses, but we all do. So how, from your experience and maybe with your current role as Deputy Program Manager in Arnhem Land, how have you used your weaknesses to actually benefit MAF and the team?
Yeah, and it's that classic interview question, isn't it, where they say, what are your weaknesses? And you tell them your weaknesses, but actually they're strengths. And humility is a really tough trait to do properly. But we've got to have humility. We've got to be humble about who we are and what we're good and bad at. Everything we do in math is about teamwork. It's about what the team delivers. Because as an individual, yeah, you can do bits and bobs, but we can't deliver the aviation and the flying and all the stuff that goes on around the program without a really strong team. And so as part of a team, we're all going to have strengths. We're all going to have weaknesses. And I think having the humility to be able to understand your own weaknesses and then communicate them to people in a way that they can understand and then support you in those areas. That's one way, or you can indeed put in plans which play to one person's strengths as you get to know them. But as you get to know your team, you can also get to know their weaknesses. So you start to respond to those and support those people. So I suppose there's two sides to it. There's one bit of the individual. So myself, just knowing my strengths and weaknesses and then being quite open about them. I certainly know that one of my weaknesses, I like big thinking. I like looking like big strategy, right? How can we do this? I'm not details man. And a lot of what we do in operations is details, making sure the flight has the right people on it, the right amount is charged to the right organization, it arrives at the right time, with the right freight on board and all the dangerous goods. I can go on and on and on about detail of delivering an effective flight in MAF. But I have to be really careful because my weakness is just not to look at that detail. But in my team, I've got two amazing mission experience placement people. So I've got Mel and Sam. Again, they're both details people. It's fantastic. And so they will catch me. And so I absolutely recognize, but it's also for me to work on. It's not just for me to be blasé and go, well, I'm not the details guy. It's for me to work extra hard to make sure I get that right. But I also know my team's got my back should it go wrong. And then, you know what, we come together and we recognize it and we debrief. And if there's a problem, then we can come together and chat about it and not point the blame at anyone. It's just like, yeah, this went wrong. Okay, how do we improve that? And as I say, really early stages of that, but it's really great that kind of culture already exists. And that really helps when it comes to understanding weaknesses, how we improve on our weaknesses and allowing you to be humble. You've got a culture that allows humility. And that's really important.
Yeah. Now, speaking of team, often family is our team. And I know when you move from the other side of the world to Arnhem Land, you know, your wife and your boys are there, and that's, you know, part of the team. But you've got two boys under 5, Barnabas and Reuben. So I'm interested to know, as someone who's recently been a dad, what you've learnt. What has parenthood taught you? What have you learnt about yourself from being a dad to two boys who I assume have a lot of energy? Because I've got a 5-year-old at home and he's got a lot of energy.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about all the stuff the army's taught me, like it's nothing compared to what big parents taught me. I think when it comes to my faith journey, that has been one of the biggest influences on my life in terms of understanding my faith and my relationship with God and understanding God's relationship with me, because bags of energy equals testing one's patience, I think, is at times. And you absolutely love them to bits, but at the same time, when you're tired and there's stuff going on outside, your stress levels can rise. Yeah, it's taught me so much about who I am and who God is to me. And I just think about how I behave towards God. And I can be that child. I can be a toddler who has fits, like runs riots, does everything wrong. yet God is patient with me. He teaches me lessons, yet he's patient with me. I don't think I ever quite understood that relationship quite as well as I do now from having children. And I just think that's so formative for a Christian to understand how God just loves, because we love our children so much, yet they contest our patience, but we just love them so much and we forgive them every time. And that is God to us.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I can relate exactly. So thanks for sharing that, Ben. Hey, in L&D, we have a program called Growing Leaders, and one of the subjects that we do in that is called rest and resiliency, and really sort of touches on the importance of the Sabbath and making sure we have rest. And I wonder how you do that when you're in program, because I think the more we have on our schedule, the less time that's available, the more that we've actually got to fight for that rest. It's important. We all know it's important, but sometimes there's other very important things around it. We're trying to figure out how do we do it and how do we have the balance.
And I think I'll take it back to my time in the military, because I think that's a useful starting point to understand rest and resilience. And I've seen a lot of burnout. My experience on that, there's two sides to it. There is routine burnout, where people are just working super hard just in their day-to-day job. So arriving 6 a.m., leaving 10 p.m. every day, whether that be to build brownie points for promotion, or that just be the demands of their job because they have just a massive portfolio, or they have a boss that expects a lot of them, or whatever it might be. So there's the routine burnout, but there's also crisis burnout. So when you're in an operational sense, there's a crisis at hand, and the result of that being that you are just working round the clock to resolve that crisis on operations, whatever that crisis might be. And so crisis burnout, I can have sympathy for. I can totally get that, because we are trying to resolve it. If it's life-saving, then that's so, so important. And I do believe in that, as long as you're then given a bit of time to recoup at the end of it. So I've definitely learned that, first of all, it's so important to implement boundaries. So boundaries which divide you from work and home, and then understand where those goalposts are in your life. So that goalpost is a personal goalpost. It's a goalpost you share with your spouse. It's a goalpost you share with God, and it's a goalpost you share with your team. What that then does is set a level of expectations, so that you know in yourself that you're going to work a routine that is sustainable in your relationship with your wife, sustainable in relationship work, and also delivering the work that you're expected to do. And so I've been really, really careful to set those boundaries and then just stick to them. And that's something I will carry forward into my work here and encourage those I work with to ensure that we just stick that. We understand what we expect of each other. We understand that at 4:30, 5 o'clock, the laptop is closed. And unless we go into crisis mode, then the laptop's not opened until 7:30 the next morning. We understand that comes to Friday, there is no reason to open that laptop until Monday, unless there's that crisis. So we just understand there's routine and there's crisis. We can do crisis for a short time, but if it's routine, then we set those boundaries.
Some very good advice there. Hey, Ben, sadly, we are running out of time. Like literally, we've got a couple of minutes left. And I kind of want to touch on the subject of unlearning, because I'm interested in, obviously, you coming from a military background. I know some people recently have come into MAF from a business background, so a non-Christian background in terms of their workplace. Are there things that you've had to unlearn from what you learnt in the military, either because they don't fit the context of MAF, or maybe it was things you learnt for a season and now you actually no longer need them?
Culture's a big one, definitely. The big change is that aviation culture is quite similar, I think, as in aviation is a very professional thing with a lot of rules and you can carry that over, but I'm still learning, I'm still developing. I've got a shift from a military culture, which is orders. You can tell people what to do. And I'm never saying that you do it in a mean way or you do it in a way that doesn't kind of support the person you're asking to do something, but there are cultural differences, which I think most people find evident. And for me, the unlearning and then learning again is transitioning from a culture I've been in for 14 years into an MAF culture. And to understand how well I'm doing that, I'm going to have to look to those around me and just say, look, how are we doing here? So for me, that's really important. And then there's the cultural shift just from the UK into Australia, into Yongu, learning the culture of the people around here. So it's not necessarily unlearning, it's just recognizing that there are going to be differences and that some things are going to have to change. Definitely is a big one for me.
Well, Ben Brown, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Learning Journey podcast. I really feel like we've almost just scratched the surface of your learning journey, and there's so much more gold there. Maybe we'll get an opportunity to chat again at some point in time and be able to extract some more of that goodness that you've been sharing with us today. But thank you so much for your time. All the very best as you continue in Arnhem Land and find your feet and culture and all those kind of things. But yeah, thanks for your time today.
Great, thanks.
We love highlighting the journey of MAF staff here on the Learning Journey, and a big thanks to Ben Brown for being our guest today. If you've got a learning journey and you'd love to share it, please get in touch with us at our email, learning.development@mafint.org. Now, on our next episode of the podcast, we chat with Peter Fryatt, Manager of Technical Training and Innovation, about his experiences training and developing some of the next generation of the MAF family. And remember, you can invest in your own learning and development by checking out some of the skill books on topics like time management and decision making. They're available now in Elevate. Just enter skill books, one word, in the search bar to see the full catalogue.